This video I was actually asked to do by quite a few people, to be honest, but I didn't know whether it was a good thing to do or not. But I suppose it's quite important in this period. Two of the people who asked are Daniel from Hong Kong and Fabrizio from Italy. So, what are we going to talk about in this video? Well, you've already seen the title, so I'm guessing you already know. We're going to talk about Covid-19 and vocabulary that is connected to it, so that we can all understand what people are actually talking about. Because some things are quite confusing. Let's start with talking about what a full-blown outbreak is. A full-blown outbreak is something that happens instantly without you realizing, suddenly. For example, even a war can be a full-blown outbreak. So, full-blown on its own as an adjective means completely developed. Epidemic. Now, people are confusing the words epidemic and pandemic, but I'll explain them in a minute. So, starting with epidemic. What is an epidemic? An epidemic is a widespread occurrence of a disease in a community at a specific time. First, it was an endemic. An endemic is usually found among people in a certain area, but now it's become a pandemic. Pandemic means it's now all over the world. But how does this spread? This disease is airborne. Airborne means it's carried through the air. But what is carried through the air? Droplets. Droplets are little pieces of liquid. That's why we need to use the mask, to stop these droplets ending up in our system. So people are all using 3-ply masks, but there are many types of masks. There's 3-ply masks, there's the mask with a filter, and there's just the normal mask as well. Some people say the normal mask doesn't do anything. Some people say the one with the filter is better. Who knows? The doctors know, so listen to them. 3-ply just means it's 3 layers, and it's normally what surgeons use in the operating theatre. A 3-ply face mask helps stop the spreading of viruses and germs, and also bacteria. We all need to use also hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer went off the shelves very, very quickly because everybody wanted it immediately, because everybody went into panic buying. Panic buying is when you go out to the supermarket and buy 300 toilet rolls, or even 3,000. This is panic buying. And because of this panic buying, we all end up being victims of price gouging. Price gouging is when somebody who is selling a product increases the price drastically. For example, when you find hand sanitizer at €300 on Amazon, when usually it costs €5. Now, we also talk about lockdown. But what actually is lockdown? Lockdown is a state of isolation or restricted access as a security measure to make sure nobody moves around and gets infected. Now, it's up to the doctors to diagnose us and see if we have the virus or not. If we are diagnosed with Covid-19, because remember the name of the disease is Covid-19, we might be put into an isolation ward in the hospital. This is a ward where you're isolated from everyone else. Normally it's a ward with people with infectious diseases. When there are several wards together, several isolation wards together, we call this an isolation unit. Now, what is quarantine? Well, quarantine comes from the word quarantena, which means 40 days. Quarantine was used in Venice during the epidemic of the Black Death. Ships were kept off the shores of Venice for 40 days. So now you know the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic. But what's the difference between quarantine and isolation? Quarantine, as we said before, is what restricts movement of the people, whereas isolation just keeps you away from other people so as not to infect anybody else. Now, I know this video is not a very happy video, but at least now maybe when you're listening to the news on the BBC, you understand a bit more.